North of the spine of the world, and west of the towering Ragged Glacier, is a frigid expanse few dare to explore, let alone inhabit. This icy land of windswept tundra has recently become locked in a perpetual, dark winter without reprieve. Auril the Frostmaiden, the divine embodiment of winter's fury, has withdrawn to this cold corner of the world to live among mortals. Here, she has cast her terrible spell. Each night before midnight, she takes to the sky on the back of a white rock, a gargantuan bird of prey native to the high mountain peaks. Silhouetted against the starry night sky, Auril weaves her spell, which manifests as a shimmering curtain of light, a beautiful aurora that illuminates the night sky and fades before dawn. This powerful magic prevents the next day's sun from rising above the horizon, turning midday into twilight and trapping the northern region in winter's dark embrace, with no sunlight or warmth to melt the snow and ice. Each casting of the spell leaves the Frostmaiden weakened, with just enough divine power left to barricade the mountain pass with blizzards and churn the sea of moving ice with blistering winds. Such measures discourage travelers from approaching or leaving, further isolating the region. Thus, the northern region of Faerun has been trapped in a different reality from the rest of the world. For though the sun never rises over the dale, it continues to rise everywhere else. But who is this goddess of ice and darkness, and how has she come to dwell on the material plane? How, if ever, will the rhyme of the Frostmaiden end? I am Omar Timsaw.
I am William Stark.
And this is D&D Legends and Lore. Warning. This episode of D&D Legends and Lore will contain spoilers from Icewind Dale Rime of the Frostmaiden. If you want to avoid spoilers for this adventure module, please consider holding off on this episode until you're ready. You have been warned.
We bow to she who wears the crown. Let the world shiver with dread. Clad in winter's whitest gown, her snow enshrouds the dead. Her fury sheds but frozen tears as gray clouds issue forth. Her wind across the wasteland shears, bringing blizzards from the north. Ice-kissed flowers caught mid-bloom, beauty kept in all its grace. Summer's gone to its silent tomb, stilling in her cold embrace. All the world in winter's white, sheathed in sleet and ice. Set upon never-ending night, she conjures paradise. Behold her everlasting rhyme, see how it covers all. Weep not for those she traps in time, behind her glacial wall. Sovereign of summer's lost, general of winter's war, long live the queen of cold and frost, may she reign forevermore.
The Frostmaiden, Lady Frostkiss, Icedawn, the Frost Sprite Queen. She goes by many names, but her true name is Auril. She is the merciless goddess of cold and winter, the embodiment of winter's cruelty and all its deadly aspects. She is most powerful in those regions that are affected by deep winters or crouch at the edges of the Great Glacier. She is worshipped primarily out of fear. In the cold and dark regions of the land, or during winters particularly harsh, folks propitiate Auril with offerings and prayers for mercy. Her priests warn others to prepare for winter and to stock extra provisions in order to have some to spare as offerings to the goddess. In times past, Auril was exclusively depicted as a woman of extraordinary allure, her eternal beauty both cold and deadly, the flower of womanhood preserved forever in a slab of Arctic ice, with sensibilities to match. The Frostmaiden was said to be a lithe, furious figure of action. Her skin is blue, her hair is long, free-flowing and white, and a fine gown of white fabric thickly furred with frost swirls about her. In practice, Auril usually manifested in the material plane as an icy breath accompanied by a cold, ruthless chuckling, and a blue-white radiance that leaves a thin line of frost to mark its passage. She also is reported to appear as a blank-eyed face of frost with long, wind-whipped white hair that radiates intense cold. Auril used this latter manifestation if she wanted to speak, slay, or confer items of power upon worshippers. She was said to slay with her life-chilling kiss in this form and confer boons by breathing them out of the face's mouth. Since she has come to Faerûn in physical form and not simply as an aspect or avatar, and depending on the ending of the adventure of Rime of the Frostmaiden, where she may still endure in Faerûn, she has come to reside in a weakened state of existence. This version of Auril can assume 3 different forms. In her first form, Auril appears as a hunched 7-foot-tall biped with the head of a snowy owl, black talons, cloven hooves, and grayish-white wolf fur covering her body from the neck down. Protruding from her feathery owl's head is a pair of curved goat horns. A cloak and cowl made of pristine white snow conceals much of her tripartite form, which her worshippers refer to as the Cold Crone. This cloak can transform into a pair of owl's wings when Auril sees fit. Auril's second form, known to her worshippers as Lady Icekiss or the Brittle Maiden, is that of a 10-foot-tall woman of fearsome aspect, made entirely of ice and frost. Her eyes burn with a cold blue light, and a thin cloak of mist forms around her. Blades of ice grow out of her body at odd angles, breaking off before they get too long. When she moves, her body crackles. In this form, Auril creates weapons of ice with which to combat foes. These weapons are supernaturally resilient until Auril discards them, whereupon they break and melt like normal ice. Auril's third form, called Winter's Womb, or the Queen of Frozen Tears by her most ardent followers, is a 3-foot diameter ice diamond containing the god's divine spark. The diamond has facets and a sharp point at the bottom. It hovers in the air, radiating intense cold all around it. When Auril speaks, her voice seems to emanate from the heart of the diamond. Auril the Frostmaiden is a neutral evil lesser god of cold indifference who embodies winter's cruelty. She is a fickle, vain, and evil creature whose cold divine heart remains untouched by any hint of true love, noble feeling, or honor. She is incapable of showing mercy or compassion. As a deity, even if just a lesser goddess, the Frostmaiden is extremely powerful, and thus arrogant to a fault. Even in her weakened state, she fears no mortals or monster. Auril is also a somewhat aloof deity, and she embodies freedom and impulse. She often toys with those who offend her, trapping them in snowstorms and then driving them insane by tantalizing them with visions of warmth and the comforts of home, before she freezes them to death. Auril's beloved ice grasps all things in her clutches, preserving them against the ravages of time. She hoards beauty in all forms, from art objects and flowers to skilled artisans and their wondrous works, freezing them in magical ice for her pleasure alone. Auril once dwelled in a divine realm called Winter's Hall in Pandesmos, the topmost layer of Pandemonium, the outer plane associated with the chaotic neutral and chaotic evil alignments in the Great Wheel cosmology. The realm of Winter's Hall was a frigid tundra fraught with violent winter storms, with winds rarely slower than 30 miles per hour. Visibility was only a few feet because of the extreme blizzard conditions. As one traveled deeper into the realm, it grew colder and colder, until the land was covered in a vast sheet of ice. It was said that there was no colder place in the multiverse, and anyone not taking shelter would take extreme damage from the bitter cold. Auril's palace itself was formed from wind walls and ice. It appeared like an inverted iceberg, hovering over the ground and surrounded in thick fog and freezing rain. Almost a mile in both diameter and height, it was the size of a small city. Huge crystalline extensions jutted out from the core of the fortress palace and were colored royal blue to sea green. The bottom surface of the floating palace included a giant window of shaped wind to view the ground below, Also located here was a dock for flying vessels, such as astral jammers and airships. The interior of the palace was a labyrinth of passageways, a latticework of pathways of crystal and support columns. One of these passages, known as the Promenade, was lit by will-o-wisp and other glowing creatures trapped in ice globes. At the top of the promenade was a dome of pure elemental ice. Auril could calm the winter storm surrounding the palace if she wanted the polar lights to be visible through the dome. At the base of the promenade was a twin oscillating structure of chaos called the abattoir, where bloody sacrifices were once performed in an attempt to trap the material plane forever in darkness and ice. Deep within Winter's Hall was the Lyceum of Frozen Shadow, Auril's throne room. Auril's throne itself was carved from frozen blue fire. The throne room was carved from the beating heart of the primordial being known as Durboggle. Souls of those dedicated to Auril in life took on the forms of cold elemental spirits. Nearly 20,000 such damned spirits resided within the palace walls alone. Other creatures of ice, such as cold element creatures and ice para-elementals, also dwelt throughout the realm, as did frost giants and an assortment of wolves, including winter wolves, wargs, and even werewolves. All canine monsters that entered the hall became charmed to obey its frost giant inhabitants and became their servants. Despite this great domain in the lower planes, Auril has always seemed to be drawn to the material plane. Auril was once aligned with the gods Talos the Stormlord, Umberlee the Queen of the Depths, and Malar the Beast Lord. Together they were known as the gods of fury, and they wrought terrible destruction across the world of Toril, inspiring fear that compelled tribute to hold their power at bay. This alliance was not meant to last, though, for Umberlee, Queen of the Wrathful Sea, grew to despise the enduring nature of the ice and snow Auril created. Umberlee seethed when Auril's frigid cold transformed her chaotic, unpredictable tides into rigid, motionless sheets of ice. And it was thus that Umberlee brought Talos and Malar into an alliance against Auril. The coalition broken, Auril retreated to the coldest corner of Toril to escape their fury. After a world-shaking event known as the Sundering, most of the gods withdrew from Toril, leaving mortals to govern their own fates without the gods meddling. But the Frostmaiden could not stay away for long. Auril returned to her icy realm in the far north and, after a time, plunged it into frigid darkness using her magic. Auril the Frostmaiden now dwells on a floating island of ice and snow, and turned a skull-shaped fortress called Grimskull, formerly occupied by frost giants, into her abode. Her presence makes the island the most frigid place in the far north. The cold is unbearable for many visitors, whose corpses become part of the island's frozen decor. Auril has made more enemies than allies in her time, including the animosity she shares with Talos, Umberlee, and Malar. Auril has also made enemies with Ulutiu, the lawful neutral demigod of glaciers, frozen seas, and polar environments, and Eredri Fienna, elven goddess of the sky, for siphoning large swaths of followers of theirs into her own. In addition to her classic portfolio of cold and winter, the Frostmaiden also claims dominion over wind and storms, bringing her into direct conflict with the ancient primordial power, Akkadi. Auril and Shantae, the Earth Mother, are mortal enemies, constantly battling each other. And Sune, goddess of beauty and love, opposes Auril, as she blames her for the destruction of much that is beautiful.
Self-reliance is your only ally. Society, community, family, these fallacies stifle the pursuit of one's own happiness. Warmth and companionship are weaknesses of the flesh, leading to sloth and gluttony. Harden your body, yet remain swift on your feet. Embrace your cold-hearted nature and demand respect of your inferiors. These are the tenets of the Stormbringer, carried aloft by chill winds. Heed these principles, and you could come to know the Frostmaiden's caress.
Few mortals favor Auril except for those who make their livelihood from winter or those who truly love the season. Her rare priests tend to be folk who would, but for their status, likely be outcasts from their communities. They practice celibacy and remain aloof from others when not serving in their official capacity. Auril's church has a few males within its ranks, but most clergy of the Frostmaiden are female. Specialty priests of Auril, called ice priestesses and ice priests, make up 1/3 of Auril's priesthood. The entire church is very loosely and informally organized, and clergy members wander and are largely independent. Upon being embraced by the goddess, clerics of Auril become immune to natural cold damage and the effects of exposure. Because of their immunity to natural cold, priestesses of Auril are often seen scampering lightly through the snow in summer weight clothing, or bathing in frigid river waters in the depths of winter to no apparent ill effect. They need much less food than other beings because of this ability, and often roam the Northlands energetically when blizzards have forced other folk to hole up against the weather. Many priestesses of Auril make a living delivering medicines, messages, and needed supplies throughout the Northlands in winter. Outside of her clergy, Auril is feared and worshipped in order to hold off the depredations of the harsh winters with which she threatens Faerun. Trappers, miners, and settlers in the north, some barbarians and inhabitants of the Great Glacier, and residents of the lands crouching at any glacier's edge revere her and honor her in attempts to placate her cold fury come wintertime. Even a few clans of frost giants are led by shamans in her service. Auril charges her clergy to cover all the lands with ice, quench fire wherever it's found, let in the winds and the cold, cut down windbreaks and chop holes in walls and roofs that her breath may come in, work darknesses to hide the cursed sun so that the chill she brines may slay, take the life of an Arctic creature only in great need, but slay all others at will, and make all Faerun fear her. Auril's clergy are commanded to revere her and sing her praises into any chill breeze or winter wind. They are to make all creatures fear or worship her and to bring down her cold power against all so that they may know her and quake before her. They are not to raise their hands against any other priest of Auril. Clergy of Auril seek to make all folk fear their goddess and her clergy through the fury of the winter weather. They also try to make themselves personally wealthy and influential by carrying out tasks that others cannot in the worst winter weather, and by magically protecting those who pay or obey from the worst winter conditions. Clergy members make offerings to the goddess of some of the wealth they amass by scattering it in the fallen snow during a storm, or throwing it through cracks in river ice or glacial crevices during the winter. In the cold months, Auril expects each of her priests to force or persuade someone to pray to her in the approved manner by beseeching Auril for mercy and praising her for the cold cleansing she brings. This prayer must last for the length of time it takes a piece of ice larger than the supplicant's hand to melt against his or her bared flesh. It must be done out of doors and preferably at night. During the winter, Aurelian clergy are also expected to slay at least one creature by cold. This is often done so as to provide worshippers or potential worshippers of the goddess with food, or to slay a personal foe of the priestess or priest. The city of Luskan has a temple dedicated to Auril, the white-spired winter palace. The structure is a roofless array of pillars and arches carved of white stone. The rituals of Auril's worship often seem cruel to outsiders. In Luskan, visitors gather at the temple to watch the frequent, wet parades, a ritual in which supplicants don garments packed with ice. They then journey between 6 white pillars known as the Kisses of Auril, which are dispersed throughout the city. The worshippers move from pillar to pillar, chanting prayers to the goddess. Upon reaching a pillar, a supplicant must climb it, and then kiss the lady, touching lips to a rusty iron plate at the top. In winter, these events resemble frantic foot races, with the added risk of frostbite and injuries caused by falling from the slippery pillars. The parade runners are cheered on by patrons who come out of nearby taverns to place bets on the stamina of the participants. Those who finish the race are thought to have helped make the winter easier, and they rarely have to pay for food or ale all winter long. Midwinter's Night is the most holy time of the year to clergy of Auril. It is a festival of ice dancing that lasts the whole night through, during which the goddess desires her clergy both to enjoy themselves and to lure as many people as possible into her service. Postulants are instructed in the ways of the goddess and must undergo the most sacred ritual of Auril to gain admittance into her clergy, the embracing. This personal ritual may occur at any time of the year, but if it is in summer, the postulant must journey to Arctic or high mountain regions in order to find a blizzard. The embracing consists of running through a blizzard all night long dressed only in boots, a thin shift, and body paint depicting symbols sacred to Auril. Celebrants either perish of exposure or are accepted by the goddess by being rescued from the pain and shivering by her embrace. Thereafter, clergy members usually pray in private by lying out in the snow all night long in prayer vigil. In summer, her clergy usually immerse themselves, except for their heads, in the coldest water they can find, typically by lying down in a fast-flowing stream. Auril answers their queries and gives them direction and missions through mind visions. Two informal but enthusiastically celebrated rituals are the coming storm and the last storm. Howling ice storms called up by clergy working en masse with all the cold magic they can muster. Together, they bring fierce weather down upon a town or region to mark the onset of winter, or its last gasp as spring begins. But now the storm of Auril seems to have become a permanent fixture in the northern lands of Faerun. The people of Icewind Dale know Auril's wrath when they feel it, and they have a name for the unending winter she has inflicted on them. They call it the Everlasting Rime. No one understands why the Frostmaiden has imposed her will in this way, or why the other gods refuse to challenge her. This prolonged winter, which has gone on for more than 2 years, threatens to doom not just the flickering lights of civilization known as 10 Towns, but also the indigenous flora and fauna that need sunlight and the change of seasons to survive. Auril's worshippers know better than to disturb her self-imposed isolation. Terrible blizzards have cut off Icewind Dale from the rest of the world, and a shroud of mist conceals her island in the sea of moving ice. The truth is that her nightly quest to hold the sun at bay stems from a need to preserve the beauty of things by freezing them. There is no way to reason with a being so bereft of compassion as Auril, but in her weakened state, she can be defeated or forced to reckon with her cruel indifference towards life. Can you defeat the cold goddess and end her everlasting rime? Or will you too, like so many before you, fall into the dark, chilling embrace of Auril, becoming an eternally frozen fixture of her frigid domain? This has been D&D Legends and Lore. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to like and subscribe for more. Also, if you can, consider leaving us an Apple Podcast review. It really helps people find the show. Lastly, if you're interested in gaining access to early ad-free episodes as well as live play and homebrew D&D content, consider supporting us on Patreon. With that, thank you for listening and happy adventuring.